The difference in protection that you get between a domestic and an offshore is night and day. If you want to attack a Cook Islands trust, you have to first go to the Cook Islands, get a court order there, and then next you'll go to Switzerland to enforce that. Having your children drive around in a car that you own is a great way to get yourself sued. America is a country that is extremely litigious. There's over 10 million lawsuits filed every single year. What we're allowing is legal extortion in the United States.
Blake, appreciate you coming out today, brother.
Brian, thanks for having me. It's great to be out here in LA.
You know, it's a little different than Miami.
Yeah, I have not had a earthquake wake me up in Miami, which I had today in LA.
But you could have like a tornado or...
We could have a hurricane.
One of those.
I grew up in Florida, and whatever you grow up around, you get very comfortable with. So hurricanes don't worry me. I actually thought the earthquake was a little bit fun for a moment. I thought maybe my neighbors in the hotel next to me were just having too much fun, but apparently I survived my first California earthquake. And I've been through one other earthquake before. That was in Japan years ago. So this is my second earthquake, but otherwise, great to be here in LA.
Was it too long? 20 seconds?
No, not very long. Not very long at all. It almost felt a little bit fun.
The best is when you're in like a high-rise building because they kind of have rollerblades on the bottom to sway.
Okay.
So it feels like it lasts forever.
That's funny. It was pretty quick. I hardly even realized what was going on until it was just about over.
Yeah, you're like, oh shit, earthquake.
Yep.
So your specialty is asset protection these days?
Yes, I focus exclusively in one area of the law, and that's setting up offshore trusts and offshore bank accounts to keep my clients' assets protected from lawsuits and divorce.
And you're not a litigator?
I am not a litigator. If I'm ever in the courtroom, it's because I'm in handcuffs, and that has not happened.
We've all been there once or twice. What led you down the path of wanting to be an attorney, and then piggyback that onto what the heck led you down the asset protection road? Because that's a very niche.
It is a very niche area. And it actually goes back to an interest that I developed in protecting money that started out back when I was in kindergarten. I went to a school where every morning your parent would give you $1 and then you'd buy your lunch. And it was kind of a way to teach this children to be responsible and pay for your lunch. But I learned that if you forgot your $1, the school would still give you a lunch. You were just a little kindergartner. And after about 30 days of forgetting my $1 every single day, the school contacted my parents to say, you need to send Blake with $1 to buy his lunch. And my parents said, oh no, Blake has been getting $1 every single morning. So the school went and did what I considered a very improper thing and searched my cubby and found a whole stack of $30. And that moment as a child, when I showed up at school the next day and everything that I had accumulated was taken away from me, really planted a seed in my mind that accumulating wealth is not the trick. That's part of the trick, protecting that money. So I ended up going to law school, and while I was in law school, I had a very good trust and estate professor that really got me interested in the area of trust planning, not necessarily offshore trust. They don't teach offshore trust in law school, but it was an area of law that sparked my interest. After I graduated from law school, I started working for a trust law firm and investigating the different types of trusts that were out there. Interestingly enough, the attorney who wrote the original Cook Islands Trust Asset Protection Trust Law had an office a few blocks away from my office. And I got to learn from him. And the farther I got into it, the more of this type of work that I did, the more it sparked my interest. And the more that I saw I was helping clients, more so than I could help clients in doing other things. And that was kind of the beginning and the start of my journey into this field.
And for the person that doesn't understand, everybody talks about trust, but that's a very vague statement. Then, talk about domestic trusts, living trusts, and offshore trusts. Want to kind of give people a snippet of why you would need each little category and why you do exactly what you do?
Sure. So there's lots of different types of trusts, and it can be kind of confusing because attorneys are coming up with new names for trusts every single day. They can come up with a marketing name. We could come up with a black drink trust if we wanted. The basic trust that most individuals will create first, those who own a home, who need something more than a simple will, but maybe they're not concerned about lawsuits, maybe their assets are under $1 million. That's the standard revocable living trust. It's great for estate planning, for when you pass away, keeping your assets outside of probate and then handing those off to the next generation. Now, if you are concerned about a lawsuit, then you should look at some type of asset protection trust. And there's two main types of asset protection trust. There are domestic asset protection trust, and there are international or offshore asset protection trust. I focus my practice exclusively on the offshore asset protection trust because we can get our clients much better protection and much better leverage to negotiate a settlement in the event of a lawsuit.
Offshore kind of scares people.
Offshore does scare a lot of people. And I think the reason why is because a lot of Americans are, quite frankly, narrow-minded. The majority of Americans have never left America. The majority of people who have left America have never gone anywhere beyond Canada and Mexico. It really requires someone to have more of an open mind in order to comfortably engage in this type of planning. But once you get to that point where you are open to global solutions to protecting yourself and solving your problems, you're going to find that you can find actually better supervised trust companies outside the United States, trust companies that have been in business longer than U.S. trust companies have been in business, trust companies that are managing billions of dollars in assets for some of the wealthiest and most powerful Americans. On top of that, you can find yourself access to better banks and a better banking system by utilizing Switzerland or another offshore jurisdiction for setting up your bank account underneath your trust. So it does take some time to get a lot of my prospective clients comfortable with going offshore. And that's a lot of what I spend my time doing every single day, explaining, teaching prospective clients about the safety of working with offshore trust companies, safety of working with offshore banks, and impressing upon my personal relationship I have with these offshore providers. I have gone to an extensive effort to build a global network of trust companies, investment advisors, attorneys, CPAs, anyone who you could need all throughout the world. I've been to dozens of different countries, met with people all over the world to help build a solid network that we can use for our clients to keep their money protected and give them peace of mind when we set up the entire plan.
Talking about CPAs, do you have CPAs you like and trust based across the U.S. that people can use?
Absolutely. A big part of the reason that clients choose to work with my firm is because of my network. I've got CPAs, attorneys, investment advisors, trust companies, protectors, anyone you could need to safeguard your asset. I have a phone call away, and as a client of mine, we gladly make those introductions.
Gotcha. And then some people, I've heard them say, well, now you have to do offshore trust filing and file taxes in other countries, and then you have to report it to the IRS. Is that a complicated process? Is that not? Is it kind of just part of the whole thing?
So it's part of the whole thing, to use your words, Brian. The trust generally does not require any offshore filings, but there are domestic filings. There's filings for the IRS, there's filings for FinCEN, which do need to be completed on an annual basis. The trust, the way we design it, does not increase the client's tax liability. It does not decrease the client's tax liability. We provide our clients a detailed memorandum on how to complete those reporting requirements, and we can refer them to a CPA if their current CPA is not comfortable completing those requirements. But quite frankly, in terms of what it actually requires the client to do, pay a few $1,000s and then simply sign off on some paperwork which somebody else prepares for you. But it is part of the investment that goes into getting yourself very good asset protection.
At what stage should somebody be looking for someone like you?
So the majority of my clients have somewhere between about $1 and $10 million in assets. I do have a handful of clients whose net worth is shy of $1 million, and I do have at least one client whose net worth is in excess of $1 billion. But most clients have between about $1 and $10 million in assets. It also depends on how much risk the client has. If the client is in a high-risk profession, a doctor, an attorney, a social media influencer, for example, these professions are more likely to get sued, and they would be...
Wait, I got to pause you for a half a second. Why would a social media influencer be worried?
Because if you are putting a lot of content out there online and you're talking about anything related to money and finance,
Got it.
somebody's going to say, oh, Brian recommended that I go buy Doge. And as soon as that tanks, you're going to have a class action lawsuit against you.
Oh. And a lot of those guys did.
And I have worked with some individuals, I can't, of course, say their
Yeah.
names, but that you would certainly recognize, who have had to navigate those issues. So, high risk professions, if you live a more risky lifestyle, if your marriage might be on the rocks, if you have children who are driving cars in your name, that's definitely a piece of advice.
I didn't
If
even
you have
think
a
of that.
child, as soon as you can, transfer the car title from your name into your children's name. Certainly do the other things, buy insurance and buy them a car that hopefully doesn't go too fast. But having your children drive around in a car that you own is a great way to get yourself sued.
It's a very interesting point. What if you're the guarantor or the co-guarantor?
So there's a difference between being an owner on a car and being somebody who owes money on the car. And if you simply owe money on the car, that generally is not going to impute the liability of the driver of the car. So if you simply are paying for somebody else's car, but you don't own it, then you're probably not going to be liable. Now, you may not be able to get your children ownership of the car until they turn 18. So those 16 to 18 is time to be very careful.
16, 18 is when I did a lot of my damage.
16 to 18 was the time that I was certainly being watched over that I survived.
Yeah, that influencer thing just kind of
Sparked.
a little interest because, I know a lot of influencers that are talking about certain products, other things. It's like they need you, just like the conversation we had offline before. That person needs to make sure that they're covered.
Yes. I think that it's important that people can do their business with confidence. When you operate from a point of fear, you're not operating at 100%. And if you're going on social media, and I salute the people who go on social media, whether it's a full-time position or whether it's simply to promote their business from time to time, and the people who can get out there and speak truly from their heart, get a great following because people recognize that, people see that. But as soon as you are hedging your bets and as soon as you are not confident in what you are saying and you have to navigate around fear, you've lost your real truth. You've lost your real energy. And that's not a position that I want my clients to be in. And so by putting them in a position where if they do end up getting sued, they can tell somebody, hey, this lawsuit's going to be a waste of your time because you're never going to get paid on it. We're letting people get out there and really perform their art and do their career as best as possible.
So let's say someone has an asset protection plan they put together years ago. Do you also do reviews of them and just do the annual updates? Is there updates, so on and so forth?
So certainly if somebody has already put together an asset protection plan, I will review it. Generally, my recommendation is if you have a trust that's domestic, I'm going to encourage them to move it offshore. The difference in protection that you get between a domestic and an offshore is night and day.
Want to give people a couple little differences?
Difference between a domestic trust and an offshore trust? Well, I'll give you the main difference. One of those has a trustee who will fold under pressure from a U.S. court order.
Gotcha.
The other one has a trustee who's not going to fold under pressure from a U.S. court order.
Because they're just going to drop it in the shredder.
By law, a Cook Islands trustee is not allowed to follow a court order from anywhere in the world other than the Cook Islands. So if somebody's coming after your assets,
They have to sue you there.
they have to sue you there, which is a very hard place to win a case. You have to prove your case by beyond a reasonable doubt. You have to post a hefty bond. You have to hire an attorney who's licensed to practice in the Cook Islands. You cannot bring a case on a contingency fee. It's just a very hard place for anyone to win. And it's the reason that so few people even go over there to try to collect. When you have a plaintiff coming after you and you have a domestic trust, chances are that plaintiff's attorney is still going to be pretty aggressive because case law has shown that under enough pressure, these trusts will break. And you're not going to be able to push back and really negotiate the way you can with an offshore trust. I've seen it with an offshore trust where when the plaintiff finds out that you have an offshore trust, that our client had an offshore trust, the plaintiff just dropped their case. Usually the plaintiff is just much more willing to talk settlement. But I have seen situations where as soon as they find out about the offshore trust, they just drop their case entirely.
You're not a litigator, but I'll ask the question anyways. What happens in a case where you do have an offshore trust and the plaintiff still keeps pushing when you have all of that in play?
So 99% of cases end up settling. And if we have a situation where we can buy off a plaintiff and stop them from pursuing their case, then that's fine. If it gets to the point where the plaintiff pushes forward, they do win their case domestically, they get a judgment, then they can go to the Cook Islands. The Cook Islands would then tell them this trust was set up before the lawsuit began. There's nothing that you can do. Goodbye. What is left on the defendant? Well, the defendant could still be called in from time to time for a debtor's exam, and they would have to reveal to the court that they still don't have any assets that they can get. It's kind of annoying, which is why I want clients to reach a settlement, but it's not nearly as annoying as losing all of your assets.
That would suck.
That would suck.
Obviously, every case is different, but ballpark, what's starting point to get into something like this?
So the price to set up an offshore protection plan is going to run typically somewhere between $20,000 and $40,000 initially.
Not horrible.
Not horrible. And then annually, you're looking at $5,000 to $10,000 a year to maintain.
Paying for the other services.
So the $5,000 to $10,000 annual fee will cover the annual fee for the trust company. The protector, your attorney would charge some annual fee as well, whether they do it on a flat fee or hourly, but there will be some annual charge with that. And then any IRS reporting requirements. All of that can usually be done within the $5,000 to $10,000 annual fee range.
It's actually not that bad.
I certainly agree. You're going to burn through a lot more cash simply in defense costs, not even counting the cost of paying a settlement or a judgment. But as soon as
I've
you
been
get
there once or
sued, you've been there once or twice. And a lot of my best clients are people who have been through it before. And after you have been the target of a lawsuit and had to go through the stress and the uncertainty and the cost and the time commitment that it takes to defend a lawsuit, people will wake up and say, you know what, let me square away my assets in a way that I am going to be able to negotiate and get this dismissed a lot quicker.
I don't know if you can answer this question, but let's say someone sets up an offshore trust and they pass and their children or whoever they leave everything down to, does everything have to get rebuilt all over again? Or can you build into the trust, okay, it's getting passed down to Joe and Mary and blah, 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 blah. And then is there a bunch of tax implications by the passing of that person?
So a trust in the Cook Islands can last forever.
So it could be generational.
Generational. It stays out of probate. Any trust will keep your assets out of probate, but the Cook Islands Trust and Offshore Trust is no exception to that. In terms of the trust, it's still a tax neutral vehicle. So as long as the family does not have a taxable estate, which is around $13 million for an individual or $26 million for a married couple, there's not going to be any estate tax due. If the client does have estate tax exposure, well, this is something that's hopefully planned for ahead of time. And there's various different strategies that can be done for estate tax planning, but I'm not going to go into that right now.
Yeah, that goes down a whole nother rabbit hole.
Correct. Basically, if you're worth more than $13 million as an individual or $26 million as a married couple, get in touch with an estate tax planning attorney. And I can certainly make a recommendation.
That's not you.
That's not me. No.
I was like putting two together. Wait, no, that's not him.
No, I focus just on asset protection from lawsuits and divorce. But if there's a tax planning matter, then I do have people in my network I can recommend.
I got you. And from the time someone finds you, pays your retainer and all that good stuff, how long until they're turnkey?
So it takes about 30 days to get the trust established, and then it takes about another 30 days to get the offshore bank account opened and assets moved into the trust. Now, if a client is being very responsive, we can expedite the process, but generally it takes about 60 days from the moment we are hired until everything is fully protected.
What's the purpose of doing the banking there versus leaving it here?
So there's two aspects to asset protection. There's the control of the asset, and that will most likely be in the Cook Islands. And you're not going to find a better place to control your assets, a more safe jurisdiction, both in terms of a safe place to do business, but safe from any creditor legal threats, than the Cook Islands. Next aspect is the physical asset itself. Because if control is outside the United States, but the physical asset is still under the jurisdiction of a U.S. court, there is a point where a court could say, we're not going to recognize the trust and we're still going to take the asset directly. So if money's sitting here in a bank account in the U.S., it's still possible that a U.S. court could take that asset. So what we want to do is have the control offshore in the Cook Islands, and then have as much of the money as possible in an offshore account, and that's most likely going to be in Switzerland.
Gotcha. And then the trust is technically dictating that account?
Correct. The only country that the Swiss courts will recognize a court order from is a country which controls that account. And the controlling party for the Swiss account is a Cook Islands trust company. So if you want to attack a Cook Islands trust, you have to first go to the Cook Islands, get a court order there, and then next you'll go to Switzerland to enforce that. Your chance of success in the Cook Islands are extremely small. And if it looks like somebody's actually going to attack the trust in the Cook Islands, here's the cool part. We can move the location of the trust to another jurisdiction and make the creditor go chase them down in another country.
Again.
So we can, yes, continue to keep, it's a cat and mouse game that we can play if it ever looked like the Cook Islands was not going to protect. But it's extremely rare that that would actually happen.
Such a simple concept in some ways, but very mind-blowing at the same time.
Very mind-blowing, and it is a fairly complex planning that we are doing. It involves many...
Your side's complex.
Many international...
My side is simple.
Exactly. And that is really where I feel I provide value to my clients. I take a fairly complex structure and I communicate it to my clients in a way that they understand. And I love doing this every day on social media, where I talk about international asset protection and everything that goes into it, but I can get it down to a 30-second TikTok in a way that a 17-year-old can understand.
Yeah, that's how I found you, was just surfing Instagram. And like you said, there's all these people on social media that aren't talking about this, talking about building wealth, but what are people doing to protect it and preserve it?
You're absolutely correct. There's a demand for this as well. I'm certain that after this conversation, we'll get some people who call and say, I hadn't thought about this before, or I'd heard about it years ago.
I have friends ask me all the time for asset guys. I'm like, I got nothing for you.
So yes, it's definitely an area that sparks a lot of people's interest, and it should, because America is a country that is extremely litigious. There's over 10 million lawsuits filed every single year in the United States. There are billions of dollars ordered to be paid out in judgments. It's a very easy place to bring a lawsuit, in that, number one, you could wake up and have no intention of suing someone, drive down the road, see an advertisement for an attorney. Attorney advertising used to be illegal.
Oh, every other billboard.
But now attorneys are out there strumming up business, and strumming up lawsuits which would not otherwise be brought but for the advertising. You then don't have to pay anything. It's all done on a contingency fee. There's no risk to you, Brian, in bringing a lawsuit against somebody. Next, you can make it very expensive for someone to defend. So even if you're bringing a bogus claim against someone, they're going to have to spend time defending this case. They're going to have to spend money defending this case. And if you're a high-end surgeon and they're taking you off the operating table for several hours a week to respond to depositions and discovery requests, that's costing your business a lot of money. And then once the plaintiff has done all this discovery in America, they have the ability to go back and amend the claim, do what's basically a fishing expedition, sue someone, find out about their personal affairs, then change the reason they're suing them. All of a sudden, you have to spend more money on defense costs. And what do a lot of defendants end up doing? They end up paying off a settlement, even though it's a completely BS claim.
Essentially, I've done that with a couple.
What we're allowing is legal extortion in the United States, and it's not right. And we want that to end. And while a system-wide change would be great, I'm not holding out for that. I'm not hopeful of it. The American Trial Lawyers Association has a very powerful influence, very powerful lobby in Washington, D.C., probably the most powerful one. They're going to make sure that lawsuits remain big business. But what can be done is individuals can protect themselves.
Yeah, if they just changed it to the loser has to pay the winner's legal fees, majority of divorce or lawsuits are off the table.
You're 100% correct. And I don't know if you saw a recent interview with Trump and Theo Von, where Trump said that exact thing. Is that actually going to come into play? Probably not. It's not at the center of political discussion. Political discussion right now is about immigration, or it's about banning TikTok. It's not. I get asked, or is the government still going to allow the Cook Islands Trust? Well, for one, a lot of people in the government, a lot of our politicians, a lot of the people who decide are using it. And number two, it's something that's not really discussed. Most people don't even know where the Cook Islands are. It's between New Zealand and Hawaii. Elon Musk did yesterday tweet that Starlink now is available in the Cook Islands, but it's a country that is pretty quiet and pretty under the radar.
Yeah, I've never been.
I've been a few times. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world. It's hard to get to, but that is definitely an advantage. The farther distance actually deters litigation.
You have to make a couple stops along the way to get there.
So they recently opened up a flight from Hawaii. Before COVID, they had a direct flight from LA.
Okay.
And then after COVID, you could only get there you couldn't get there at all for a while during COVID. And then they opened up flights through Auckland and Sydney. And then while I was in the Cook Islands a couple years ago, they announced that Hawaii was going to have a flight coming to the Cook Islands, and everybody in the Cook Islands was celebrating. And me being from Miami, where there's thousands of flights every single day from every city in the world, I couldn't understand what the big deal was. But to a little island of 10,000 people, that's a lifeline. That is all kinds of new tourism dollars coming in for them.
Which is amazing for Hawaii and them. Because it forces people to go through Hawaii now.
That's true. It's good. It's good for both. It's good for both countries. Both locations.
When someone sets this up, do they need to go to the Cook Islands?
At no point during the process do you have to step out of your home. You'll need
so I can be in my underwear the whole time.
You can, at some point, you will need to sign a document in front of a notary. So I'd recommend maybe putting on some gym clothing when the notary comes over with the paperwork for you to sign.
But outside of that,
beyond the meeting with the notary who can come to your home, you'd never have to go to the Cook Islands. You never have to go to Switzerland. You can do everything from the comfort of your own home.
But if you wanted to, it would be considered a business expense.
So if you wanted to, you can definitely go to the Cook Islands or New Zealand, where one of the trust companies is headquartered. You can go to Switzerland as well. The bankers from Switzerland come over to the United States a few times a year to meet with their clients. So when you open a Swiss bank account, you will have an investment advisor that would probably come and meet you at some point. The Cook Islands trustees, they do come to the United States, but less often, maybe once a year, and you may need to coordinate a time with them, but you can go to the Cook Islands and they'd be happy to meet with you there as well.
Is there a minimum that these banks require people to keep?
So most Swiss banks require a minimum of about $1 million in order to open up an account, and that can be spread out between CDs, stocks, bonds, various different traditional currencies, euro, Swiss franc, US dollar, or even crypto. You can also hold gold or silver. So pretty much any investment option that you have now, you can invest in with a Swiss bank. My firm, we do have relationships with a few banks that will allow our clients to open up accounts for as little as around $500,000 in the Cook Islands. If somebody does not qualify for that, we may be able to present a case that, well, they only have $400,000 right now, but they're selling a $2 million home soon and more money's coming in. We might be able to get it open for slightly under $500,000. Alternatively, we can get an account open for clients in the Cook Islands. There's a very safe bank in the Cook Islands that will open up accounts for as little as $250,000. If that's not available for clients, well, they're probably not setting up an offshore trust in the first place, but we do have relationships with other international banks. We've got one in Panama that can open an account for even under $100,000 in some circumstances, or you can even just buy gold and silver, hold that in a vault in Switzerland for as little as $50,000. But most clients do have about $1 million, and I like to see them put that amount because that really gives them access to a variety of excellent Swiss banks.
Gotcha. But what if you're dealing with someone that doesn't have just a lot of liquid, but they have a lot of assets?
So we still want them to open up some bank account offshore. That way they have a place to put more liquid funds as their domestic assets get liquidated. If you own real estate and it's not already protected, for example, Florida and Texas, your primary home is already protected. But if you own a second home in one of those states, or you don't live in a state that has a good homestead protection, then you'd still put the real estate into the trust. You could also look at doing some type of equity stripping strategy. So either putting a mortgage or a lien on the property and then putting the proceeds into an offshore account. The most important part, though, is getting the trust established, getting the asset moved under the trust. This way you have the flexibility to take further measures later and moving assets outside of the reach of the U.S. court system if a threat ever materializes down the road.
If someone's already in litigation, can they use your services or not really?
Maybe. It depends on what type of litigation. It depends on how much the claim is. It depends on the client's asset level. So it's definitely best if you can create the trust before any litigation arises. You're going to have access to better banks. It's going to cost you less to set everything up, and you're going to get a much better result. You're going to have much better settlement leverage. A lot of people do wait until litigation arises to contact my law firm, and we'll do an analysis. For some, it's too late, depending on the situation. Certainly, if they're dealing with something with the federal government, an agency of the federal government, we're not going to be able to help out. But if it's a smaller dispute, and perhaps there's some insurance money that could cover that dispute, or we could leave a little bit of money outside of the trust, or authorize the trustee to make a distribution to cover a pending claim, then we could still create the trust. And if everything's settled, then they have the trust for their use going forward, or we could set it up in a way that simply will make it a little bit, will slow down the collection process, but we're not going to be able to protect against a pending claim. So damage mitigation can usually still be done even when there's a pending lawsuit, but clients get a much better result, much better value
if it's
done before the threat of any litigation.
So you see all these people online talking about buy this real estate or buy that to do Airbnbs or rental income or the whole ADU thing. Is that something you can also buy the property with the trust to protect yourself during that process, through the build phase, through everything, just so you have less liability out there?
Absolutely. Real estate comes with some risks. It also requires you to own something that cannot be moved, but real estate creates more millionaires than any other industry. It's an area that if you take the time to learn and understand, it's a great way to grow wealth, certainly if you do it consistently and the right way. And all that can be done through and under an offshore trust. And real estate is a very common asset that my clients own. But all through the building development stage, yes. The way it would be done is you'd have the Cook Islands Trust as the umbrella structure. Under that, there'd be an LLC. So the trust would own
the LLC be stateside?
Yes. If it's owning domestic property, we recommend registering the state domestically. We recommend registering the LLC
or whatever
in the state where the property is located, because having an offshore and out-of-state LLC, when the property's in Maryland, the tenant's going to be in Maryland, the person who sues you is going to be in Maryland, the judge is going to be in Maryland. Maryland law is going to apply either way. May as well just use a LLC local to that state.
But the trust would own it.
But the trust would own it, yet the client could still serve as manager, could still be the one to interact with the tenant, could still be the one to collect rent.
And once it's in the trust, is it hard to sell that asset to do 1031 or something else?
Not at all. You've got complete flexibility to add and remove property from the trust. You can decide how the money is invested. You can purchase real estate. You can sell real estate. It's a completely flexible structure.
What about for the people that have life insurance policies? Could that be owned by the trust, or would that have to go into an ILIT that then the trust would own the ILIT, or vice versa? Or...
So it depends. Generally, the trust companies we work with are happy to own insurance. Some insurance companies will let you transfer a policy into an offshore trust. Some won't. So it'll just depend on the individual company that the client is working with. It also depends on the type of insurance. If it has some cash value, then that's an asset we want to protect. But if it's simply term insurance, it does not need to be held under a offshore trust, because there's nothing really for a third-party creditor to take away. You would simply name the beneficiary of that insurance as your trust, so that when you pass away, the money pays into your trust and creditors of yours can't intercept any life insurance that way. You had a second part of the question there, but I forgot what it was. Do you need an ILIT? So an ILIT, an irrevocable life insurance trust. This is a helpful tool if you have a taxable estate. So we were discussing earlier, if an individual has more than 13 or a married couple has more than $26 million. If you have life insurance, this is a great asset to gift away while you are alive. So for example, if the policy is worth $1 million now, but at your death, it's going to pay out $10 million, instead of eating up $10 million of your gift and estate tax exemption once you pass away, go ahead and give it away now and just eat up one. So that's generally the first estate tax planning strategy that is recommended to someone. So someone who has a few $100,000, maybe a revocable living trust. Somebody who has more than $1 million, start looking at an asset protection trust. Somebody who has more than $10 million, start looking at an ILIT. And if you have more than $20 million, well, then there's a whole other menu of estate tax planning strategies that are available.
If you don't start planning now, it's going to be a headache later.
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of the cure. A few hours of estate and asset protection planning in many circumstances can do more to preserve a family's wealth than decades of working.
How much work on, if I were to retain you for services, am I looking that I have to set aside 5 hours a week for?
Maybe 5 hours total to get everything set up. I said that the entire setup process for a trust takes about 30 days. We have registered trusts from the time we were hired until the trust was registered in about a week. And this is a client who they hired us. We sent them our intake form. They filled out everything we needed, signed the trust document, got it back to us the same day. We submitted everything to the trust company. They did their background check, sent it off for registration, and it got done all in a week. So the amount of time commitment from a client, it can be done in a few hours. I
was thinking it was some kind of time suck.
Not necessarily. I mean, if you're organized, you can get us the information within a few hours. It's really not a huge time suck.
It's just dedicating the time to find it.
It's dedicating the time to find it. I mean, you do have to get out if you have a passport, get out your passport and get that notarized. You do need to take the time to meet with the notary, but there's notaries around. You can call one up in a couple hours. They will be here. Most people know off the top of their head a lot of the information that we need to verify. A copy of the tax return may be required to verify the source of income. The trust companies just want to make sure they're not working with any drug dealers or terrorists. But and also it depends on what all the client has going on. In the situation where there is pending litigation, it's going to take a little bit longer to onboard because the trust company is going to need to dig into what's going on with that litigation. It also depends on the client's background. If they have some issues in their background, the trust company is going to need to investigate that. Now, what type of issues in their background are of concern? Stealing, theft, anything related to money. The trust companies don't want to be dealing with somebody who has stolen some money and then is trying to use the trust to protect their funds. On the other hand, if somebody was arrested for smoking some pot or they had a DUI years ago, the trust companies generally don't care about those type of issues.
Gotcha. What are some simple tips people can do now to start protecting themselves?
Well, there's a lot that you can do to reduce your chances of ending up on the wrong side of a lawsuit. The first thing I would recommend is ADR, Alternative Dispute Resolution. In any contract that you have with your employees, with your suppliers, with your business partners, include an ADR provision, which says that anytime there's a dispute, it's going to be settled outside of court by a neutral mediator as opposed to going through the court system. Next, I recommend buying insurance. Buy as much car insurance as your auto agent will sell you. Our nation's roads are quickly becoming a highway to wealth. Other types of insurance that are good to have: homeowners insurance and umbrella insurance, malpractice insurance in most circumstances. Now, if a doctor is paying $100,000 a year for $200,000 of coverage, I say skip that and let's just put together a good asset protection plan for you. This is not the most romantic advice, but signing a prenuptial agreement. Now, a prenuptial agreement can be disregarded by a court, but at least you have gotten the mindset of both parties on the same page, and that can be helpful to decide who gets what in the event of a divorce while the waters are calm, as opposed to spending a lot more time, money, and energy down the road fighting over things later. Same issue with insurance. Insurance is great. However, some cases, some situations will not be covered by insurance. Insurance does not cover everything. Insurance companies sometimes, for the bigger cases, will try to hide behind one of the exclusions. And some cases will go beyond policy limits. Sometimes insurance gets paid late, and there's a little lapse in coverage. So what else can be done? Well, protecting your assets. And there's two ways of doing this. One is to rely on exemption planning. What cannot be taken away from you in bankruptcy? A car worth around $10,000, depending on what state you're in. A certain amount of equity in your homestead cannot be taken. Retirement accounts, IRAs, 401k, depending on how much you have in those and what state you're in, those may already be protected. Now, IRAs and 401ks can still be taken because of a tax debt or a divorce. And then finally, protecting your assets through the use of an offshore asset protection trust. So if it's not going to fall into an exemption planning, putting into an offshore trust will still allow you to essentially control how your money is invested, still direct when you receive a distribution. But if someone gets a judgment against you, you can prevent them from collecting. And one more tip, don't be flashy. Now, I realize if being flashy helps you grow your business, then go be flashy. But the more attention that you get on yourself, the more likely it is someone's going to want to take a bite of that apple.
Brings up a great question. Let's say business guy Joe isn't flashy. His net worth is 10, 15 million. But his wife likes to show everything on social media.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to bite him in the ass?
Maybe. Yes, social media is a powerful tool for growing a business. I guess it's a tool also for growing egos in some situations as well. I use a lot of social media. I share a lot of my life on social media, but it's definitely a common thing that comes up in lawsuits where people say, well, on this financial affidavit, you say you don't have any money, but explain where you're getting all these cars that you keep posting on social media. So yes, having a spouse who's flaunting your wealth for you could attract a lawsuit.
Yeah, and people like to tag locations and all that fun stuff too.
Oh, correct. It's great for stalkers too.
Well, then just, when they're getting deposed, why were you here on this date?
Correct.
Gives them an easy roadmap to find you.
Yep, it does.
Any other things people can do to protect themselves in day-to-day?
Day-to-day, treat your clients with respect. Most of us don't want to sue somebody who generally was trying to do their best for us. On the other hand, if you are harmed by someone and you feel like they never cared about you in the first place, people are more willing to bring a lawsuit against you. So showing a genuine concern for people. Having well-drafted business documents. It is worth the time and the effort to have an attorney look over legal documents for you before you engage in business, because it's very easy to have a contract get drawn up. You can download a contract from Google for free and have it ready to sign in a few minutes. But when it comes time to actually enforce that contract or defend yourself, you're going to need to hire an attorney. And it's much better if you've hired an attorney from the beginning to draft that contract. So when something comes up, the attorney's familiar and stands behind that document.
And puts in the ADR.
And puts in ADR, absolutely. If you are an attorney and you are looking for work, you can very easily find work now suing somebody else's employer. Employment litigation, especially here in California, is very prevalent. It's a reason that my firm has been getting lots of phone calls from disgruntled former employees. And it's very easy for a former employee to exaggerate or even fabricate a claim against their employer. And again,
once you get to mediation, you're going to settle.
Again,
it's going to cost you $75,000 to get to mediation.
Correct. And you can often just pay off a case and move forward, or you can stand on your ground, but take the risk that you're going to get a jury that for the wrong reasons doesn't like you. And I work with some people in the political space who are concerned that if they are sued, they're going to have a jury who finds a hefty verdict against them, not because of the reason for the lawsuit, but because they've taken a political stance.
Look, I play with firearms on social media. Kind of points which way I point.
And there are some people who don't like firearms.
Mm-hmm.
And that would not be fun to be on the wrong side of a jury with that.
Not at all.
And kudos to you for doing what you love on social media and not being afraid to do that.
I've dialed it down. I lost the YouTube channel because of it.
Okay, I was surprised that you had a YouTube channel with it still, because I had another friend who did that for a while and that got
that channel is essentially dead.
Got it. Got it.
I tried to revive it and
But I'm a big fan of protecting your money,
protecting everything.
I do some MMA training as well. I believe in protecting your health, protecting your wealth. Protection is a wonderful thing, and as an adult man, the more protected you can be across every discipline, the better service you're doing for yourself and your family.
We've covered so much, and I'm kind of on information overload.
It's a lot of information that I share, and it's the reason that I try to keep it condensed. But I've got a lot of information I've shared. I've been doing this for a while. I've met with a lot of people in the industry. I've seen clients go through some hard times. I've seen clients get to the point where they are at a much happier place. And when I have a client call and say, "Hey, Blake, I just want you to know the trust worked exactly as you said it would," that's just the most rewarding part of my career.
Can't beat that.
That I can't beat that. I mean, keeping clients out of a courtroom. Who wants to be in a courtroom in the first
No
place?
one even wants to get served.
Nobody even wants to get served. Yes, the best lawsuit is not the one you win; it's the one that you avoid entirely. And if there's nothing for someone to take away from you, you've eliminated the economic incentive for anyone to sue you.
Exactly. Where can people find you, Blake?
I'm on the interwebs, BlakeHarrisLaw.com. Blake Harris Law is my handle on every social media platform. Welcome to reach out through my website, fill out a contact form. I have a very well-trained team that will respond to you very quickly. So I'm more than happy to discuss your asset protection needs. We don't charge for initial consultations. And if there's something we can do to help, whether it's by working with my firm or recommending some other provider, I'm more than happy to help people. I like what I do for work because I really believe that it is paramount to freedom. Freedom does not exist without protection. If somebody can take away everything you have, you are not free. And the more people who we can get to do this type of work, the more people who we can get aware that this is even an option, we are essentially preserving freedom here in America.
Do you work with people in all 50 states?
I work with people in all 50 states. I work with people all throughout the world. 95% of my client base comes from the United States because that's where the heaviest litigation is. But I do have clients in Europe. I do have clients from Australia. I do have clients in other continents as well, but those are mostly U.S. citizens living in other countries. But 95% of my business is from the United States. We have offices in Denver and Miami, but we work with clients everywhere.
Technically, you can be anywhere, they can be anywhere, but the way you have the process set up.
Correct. I mean, it's 97% of my clients I never end up meeting in person. If they happen to be in Miami or we happen to be in the same city at the same time, I'm more than happy to meet with them. But again, the whole process can be done from your underwear. And I'm not meeting with a client in their underwear.
Forgot to ask, do you also do corporate compliance, or is that handled by other people?
So we can set up a trust either for an individual or a married couple. An individual, a married couple, or a company can set up a trust as well. Generally, if it's an individual's own business, we would just have them set up their own trust and then take cash, pull as many assets out of that business, operate it lean and mean, and put the proceeds into an offshore account. However, for some circumstances, the corporation wants to hold some money offshore in a way that they can't be ordered to bring it back, and we can set up a Cook Islands trust for a company as well.
And then what about like the yearly minutes and all the other stuff for those LLCs? Is that something you handle, or?
So that's not what my firm does. We'll form a business if it's within the scope of setting up a Cook Islands trust. So we'll form a Nevis LLC in some cases. We will guide a client through registering a domestic LLC. But if it's getting more into the nitty gritty of a business setup and you've got multiple business partners that need to have their points negotiated, we would refer them to a business attorney.
Gotcha. All right, brother. I appreciate you coming on today, making the trip.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Oh, yeah. We'll be picking each other's minds.
Yes, let's stay in touch.
All righty, bud.
Sounds good.